All right. Hey everyone, welcome to another week of the economy update. We're now on week 77. And yeah, welcome to you, Stephen.
G'day, how are we?
Yeah, I'm going well. Hopefully everyone else is going well. How are you today?
Yeah, really good. Really good.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a cool day, but no, it's a good day.
Australia is cooling down a lot, that's for sure. We're heading into winter. So where are you tuning in from?
I'm on the sunny coast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to this. There's been a lot happen, especially from where I'm from WA, Mark McGowan stepping down, but we're going to be covering that shortly. Really interesting stuff. But yeah, welcome again, everyone. As usual, you guys would know the structure. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, pretty much what we'll be doing is the first 30 to 45 minutes will be on the Australian economy, just going through the update on what's happening around our country. And the next part of it for about half an hour to 45 minutes will be going through the global economy and then taking questions and wrapping things up. So may as well get straight into it. So Stephen, over the last few weeks, we've actually been talking a lot about the voice movement and what's happening around that space. You've obviously shared your thoughts around it, and I think we're all on the same page of what we think with this Indigenous voice to Parliament. But now it seems like as it keeps going, things are just getting nasty. So can you share the latest around what's happening with this topic, how it's playing out, and what the outcome looks likely to be?
Yeah, look, it's going to get really nasty, and it's been driven by the idiots on the left, and they've made it such an emotional debate that pretty much if you're for it, you're a good person. If you're against it, you're a scum-sucking racist and you hate it and you should be, euthanized and got rid of. And that's a really bad position when you can't even talk to people. I was out with a group of people the other day and the topic come up and people that you thought were, let's say, reasonable people just went off their nana at it. If you had a different opinion about it, they just went off their thing. And meanwhile, most of these people have never been to an Aboriginal community in their life, don't even know what an Aboriginal community is, and wouldn't know that there's a whole, heap of different Aboriginal tribes, and none of them, are the same, and they've all got different opinions, and they're all got different thing, and that there's Aboriginals that are against this as well as Aboriginals for it. But the nastiness that's really coming out in this campaign, and the emotions being driven behind it, goes to show you that, for something that, they keep telling us it's basically a done conclusion, it's all over, blah, blah, blah. They're really showing that what is to come. So pretty much what they're showing now is a form of what is to come, as in if it passed. Basically you just got to toe the line or you're on the outer. So this is really bad, and it's just making itself even worse.
So how are the people responding to it, just the general public? I'm assuming especially the ones who believe in the propaganda, they are probably going to support it.
Look, there's a big divide. There's a lot of people out there that just think it's a waste of time and waste of money. We've done it before. But a lot of people are actually okay with putting something in the preamble, but they're not happy with having this mechanism that's basically a second parliament. And that's what it is, right? And then it'll go to treaty, and then it'll go to it's just going to work out really, really bad for this country, because this is the thin edge of a larger wedge. What I'm finding is those that understand what this actually is, that this is, if they take the emotion out of it and they actually work through it step by step, they're the ones that get to the point. And a lot of these people are actually, as I said, they're for the recognition. Right? They're for that we need to do something to improve the lives of the Indigenous communities and the Indigenous people. But when they realise what is going to happen on the legislated side of things, you know, they keep saying, and Albanese and Linda Burney and all those, they keep letting slip every now and then little bits of what they're trying to hide. You know, Albanese basically said no government will go against anything the Voice says, right? So pretty much the Voice is going to override Parliament. Linda Burney came out and said that this is just the beginning, right? And then she quickly backtracked and, you know, covered that up. We know Lydia Thorpe and her cronies want treaty basically straight away. And so it is coming out. Now, those that just take this on emotional and just take it on the Twitter headlines or the 2-second headline that's on a media, they're the ones who have no understanding what this is. They're dangerous because you can't have a conversation with them. They're very dangerous because you can't have a conversation with them because it's all emotional and you ask them 2 serious questions and they melt down, right? One of the questions that I like to ask these people is, one, have you ever visited an Indigenous community out west or in the north? And the first thing they do is they melt down. The second question is, do they realise that there's 12 members of the Indigenous 12 members of Parliament that identify as being Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander, and then they melt down because they've got no idea. And then you can keep just hitting them with logic and that sort of stuff, and they just melt down all the time. So that's the problem you've got, is that you've got a group. So if you have a look at Australia's voting population now, and this leads into everything else, is Australia's voting population now, and I always get the ages wrong, it's 18 to 34, 35 to 54, and 55 plus, right? If you take those 3 age groups, in the 18 to 34, it's about 70% are for it. In the 35 to 44, it's about 60%. And in the 55 plus, it's about 65 against, right? So this is where I said on last week's thing when we had Joel on, and I've said it before, is I think the majority of Australians are going to vote yes, right? So we're going to have the one part of the voting approved, but you're not going to get the majority of the states. Because if you have a look at the states, the demographics of Queensland and WA, especially in South Australia, close on their heels, is an older demographic, right? So you're probably not going to get Queensland and WA in South Australia, but you'll definitely get Victoria, New South Wales, and Tasmania. So you're not going to have the majority of the states, so it fails. But most of the people, and then this is the other problem we're going to have after this, is most of the people won't understand how a referendum actually works, because there is no work being done to actually tell people how the referendum works. That you need to meet 2 criteria, not just, have a vote and it gets over the line. So then we'll have a whole heap of crap that happens after this where they'll say, it's rigged and, all this sort of crap. So that is how it's going to get nastier and nastier, because it's going to be drawn out in emotion. It's going to be drawn out by ignorance, and it'll be drawn out because people don't understand, 1, what it is, and 2, the system to put this thing into place.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, really interesting. And it's not going to help the people that it's meant to help. It's not going to help the Indigenous communities, whether it gets up or doesn't get up. because the focus is all on the inner city latte sipping, champagne swilling, tofu eating elites who think that by waving a flag and ticking a box, they're improving other people's lives.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to the next topic now, which I think we can all agree it came quite as a shock to a lot of people, especially I didn't see it coming myself. But yesterday, Mark McGowan announced his decision to step down as WA Premier after 6 years being in charge due to his main reason being he's mentally exhausted from all of the challenges and things that it presents and whatnot. So basically, what do you think his resignation means, Stephen, for Western Australia, but also for Australia as a whole and the future of it?
Look, this is a trend. We're starting to see a trend with all these COVID authoritarian premiers and prime ministers and world leaders that they're all quickly being retired. They're all quickly being given cushy jobs, or they're being hidden because they know that once the wave gets through of the opposition's getting into place, there'll be then inquiries into them and possible political damage could come of it for other people. With the likes of the guy in Tasmania that left, who's the other guy? There's several around anyway. They're all starting to leave. It's rumoured that Anna will go before the Queensland election. But bring it back to WA, it's not good for WA actually, because if you have a look at the contenders, you've got a union fight brewing. The female, and the name just escapes me, is backed by one union, and the guy, oh God, the names have just escaped me. Anyway, the two contenders, one's backed by one union group and the other one's backed by, so you've got a union massive heavyweight. McGowan goes, a few of his other ministers will go as well. So there's going to be a big void in the leadership in WA because there's quite a few people that'll step in that are only been there for 3 or 4 years, and so don't have the depth of experience, and their officers won't have the depth of experience that WA needs, considering it's moving headlong into some pretty big disasters, housing, energy, hospital system, transportation system. So the real big things, the same here in Queensland, the same is also happening in Victoria. Now you've got these massive problems happening that regardless of whether you liked him or not, he had the support of a lot of people, especially in industry and in politics, in the federal sphere and all that sort of stuff. So it would have been easier and a lot smoother for WA. So where am I going here? The excuse he's using about being tired, if you have a look at them, they're all using the same excuse. So this is all coming from one central playbook. Jacinta Ardern used the same thing. What's his name in Tasmania used the same thing. The leader in, who was it? The one that went in, was it Finland or Sweden or somewhere where it went, they were using the same line. I'm tired. It's taking its toll and all that. So they're all being coached from central casting, and it's all part of the trend and the plan to move these people out of the spotlight so they can bring a new wave of authoritarians through, so that then they can keep going on with their next plan. So watch this space on what happens. If Anna goes shortly, which I expect her to do, expect Albanese to go to an early election, because what's going to happen is if Anna goes up here and now McGowan's gone. You've got a new premier in New South Wales. What'll happen, and you've got a new premier in South Australia. What'll happen is the support for Labor will start to slide, right? Especially coming into the big elections coming up, Queensland, WA, because WA's got an election coming up in, I think it's March 2025. Queensland's August 2024, or is it March 2024? Anyway, both the two big states have got elections coming up soon, and then Albo can either run late after those elections, and if they're not good, it'll reflect on him. So he'll want to try and go early to stop that slide, because you always have a slide when you have a change of a premier. And so we're going to have some interesting times politically and at both at a state and a federal level. So.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting seeing what comes out of it, because Roger Cook is the interim premier at the moment.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on him?
Oh, look, not a bad bloke. He's just on the wrong side of politics. He's been there for quite a while. Bit of a steady hand, do nothing type guy. It won't be as divisive as McGowan. So,
yeah.
And I was reminded the other day when I was in the Navy, McGowan was a lieutenant around the same time as me. So I was a lower deckman, of course. I worked for a living, and we were both stationed at Stirling. And I'm talking to a friend of mine over there. Goes, you do know that he was. We used to keep watch, and he was the officer yeah. So I served with him in a nutshell.
How crazy is that? Comes full circle.
Yeah. He was an officer, so he would have been a prick.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to the next point of the Australian economy update before we move on to the global one, which is the economy is slowing down from what we've been seeing, but it's not quite dead yet. So, for example, we're seeing recent interest rate hikes and also cost of living, and all of this put together is putting pressure on everyday Australians. People are feeling the effects of cost of living rising, as well as all of the interest rates that have been hiked up. And I'm just curious, how are you seeing this space play out, and what should people be doing to make sure they're not being caught out by all of the, as you've said previously, government-induced effects like this?
Yeah, look, the economy is slowing, definitely slowing. It's not quite dead. We're seeing the effects of it in some of the businesses I'm involved in, especially consumer goods type businesses where people are looking at their discretionary spending. Anything B2B, business to business, seems to be still robust, so that there is still some spending happening in the business end of town, and interest rate hikes, the cost of living hikes are taking its toll. But the good thing is people have got jobs, so unemployment is still low, even though it's rising. They're saying it's rising to 4%. I think you'll find that it was always at 4%. They just fudged the numbers to take it to 3% or wherever it was for a headline. But so there is money in people's pockets, even though that money's not going as far as what it used to. The housing crisis is a big issue. I know it. I'm currently looking for accommodation for myself, and trying to find housing that suits is a pain in the butt. I want to try and get something for 6 months, and everyone's going, no, minimum 12 months. And you can't get studio apartments, or you can't get one-bedroom apartments because they're being snapped up like nothing else. And the prices for them are as much as a 2- and 3-bedroom apartment. So it's just really, really weird what's happening out there at the moment. So So those who have cash buffers, those who have their own businesses, those who are structured in a way where you're taking your wealth first and you're living within inside your means, so you're not like catching up with the Joneses next door and overspending and living on credit cards and the like. They're doing well. They're the ones filling cafes. They're the ones filling restaurants. They're the ones going out. The ones that were stretched, that bought houses that they couldn't afford and should never have afforded. They're the ones who are stretched, and they're the ones who are struggling. So we've got a divided population base. So we've got the ones who have the cash, have done everything right, but are getting smashed by rising taxes, rising cost of living, government-induced inflation. And then they've got the ones that always were looking at government to support them, were overstretched, couldn't afford a house at 2% interest rates or 3% interest rates, so definitely can't afford one at 5% interest rates, or 6% where they should be. So we're going to have a very big divergence in the economy. So if you're a business owner or you're looking for places to earn some extra cash or expand, you want to focus on those who are sensible at the top end, self-funded type people, and that. One of the things that was really interesting the other day is I can't remember who it was, Lifeline or one of those. I think it was in Brisbane. No, it was in Sydney. The food that they normally get on their shelves and that sort of stuff that they distribute that lasts them, say, 10 days to 2 weeks, they'd run out of it within 5 days. They'd run out of it within a week. They're seeing a lot more people who are under pressure, especially under mortgage stress, turning to the food banks and turning to these other organisations and other places to get groceries and stuff for home. So that was an interesting and bit of an eye opener. So.
That's for sure. So really the best way to deal with all of this slowing economy is just making sure you live within your means, manage your money wisely, and just be prepared for it.
Oh, 100%. Earn extra cash if you can. If you're a small business, really focus on your business and strip out all the stuff that's not necessary, because there's bound to be stuff inside your businesses that is unnecessary. I've just done a review on a couple of businesses and on myself, and gone through and went, shit, I've got 5 or 6 subscriptions here to stuff that I don't need. I don't read it. So grab your one Sunday or Saturday or one morning you got some time spare, grab your credit card statement, grab your bank statement, go through it and find your automatic direct debits, and challenge yourself. So one of the things that I use is a 3-month rule. If I haven't used something in 3 months, I turn it off. And if you, because obviously you haven't missed it, or otherwise you'd be using it all the time. So, and sometimes when you have a look at it, you sign up to these platforms and you go, oh yeah, they give you 1 month free or 2 months free, and they do that on purpose because they know that the average person gets goes full ball for 3 or 4 weeks and then doesn't use it. It's like a gym membership, right? And it just keeps getting deducted and away you go. So really have a look at that sort of stuff. You'd be surprised at, I think I took $300 or $400 out of subscriptions and stuff. Some of them were being billed yearly, some of them were billed monthly, and some were quarterly and so forth. And that was just having a look through, apps on my phone and, my credit card statements, and a couple of things popped up and I went, I don't even know what that is, so I went and investigated it and
It is.
turned it off.
Yeah, it is true. I noticed that as well because I saw a subscription come out that I don't even remember using, and it definitely is true. There's always stuff you forget about or didn't realize was being built.
Yeah, and some of them are quite hefty. You know, like they're in the $40 and $50 mark, especially if you're getting them billed yearly or you're getting them billed twice a year or something.
And it's always the cheap ones, like the $10 a month or so, that you've got to look out for because you just generally don't even notice it as if you're just good. Whereas in recessions and when cost of living is rising up, you notice those things.
I noticed I had a heap of $2.99, US $2.99, where I've subscribed to something, some news feed or something in the US, and there must have been 10 of them that you just gets $2.99. Who cares? $2.99. Who cares? So you just go through your credit card statements and have a look, and I would challenge everyone, reduce your expenses by 10%. Go through now and have a look. I bet you can reduce your expenses by 10%, and then try and increase your income by 10%. You know, it is tough. If you're a wage earner out there, go and ask your boss for not necessarily a cash increase in your wage, but maybe something that can offset it. So, for instance, one of the things that we've done is we're paying tolls for a couple of people, right? So that can be a couple of $100 a month for people that are transiting, and for us, it's an expense, right? So because we say it's work cars and away you go.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Well, what we'll do now, that wraps up the Australian economy. So as usual, guys, if you do have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box, and then we'll be able to move on from there and ask them once we've covered one of the points. But what we'll do now, we'll move into the global economy and go through the points that we have here for the global economy. And once again, global economy, we're opening this with the Trump Watch, our famous series on this viral hashtag trend that we've got to create. And last time we spoke about this, Trump had to pay $5 million for defamation in his recent rape case. That's where we picked up from. But moving on from that, that was about 2 weeks ago, so there probably would have been more come out of it. And can you share what the latest is around Donald Trump, and has he had any progress for his election campaign?
Oh man, he's had big progress. It seems to be every time he gets indicted or something comes out about a lawsuit that he's in, I think at last count, it was 12 or 14 either indictments, court cases that have been lodged, or something that someone's trying to get him for. So there's 2 or 3 rape cases. There's fraud issues from New York. There's with the paperwork. There's stuff around property developments. There's stuff coming out of the woodwork, and it seems to be every time someone tries to sue him or bring some sort of case about it, it backfires on him, and all it does is make him more popular. His poll numbers have increased. He's now well and truly the front runner for the GOP nomination. And the Democrats, the feedback I'm getting from people over in the States is the Democrats are actually sitting around going, well, if Donald Trump's going to be the nomination, we're going to put Biden up against him. That's going to be a great move if they do that, because they won't have COVID to hide Joe in his basement. Right? He'll have to get out there. He'll have to do the things. He won't be able to have rallies where there's 6 people in cars. Right? He'll actually have to build audiences. And we know a lot of the Democrat audiences are still running around scared to go out and not doing big stuff in public and all this sort of stuff. So there's actually quite quite an interesting movement happening where the Democrats think that Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump again because of they think it can be the same conditions as last time. It's just not going to happen. We're also seeing some strong contenders on the left from people like Robert Kennedy and what's her name? Sorry, I've gone blank. Tulsi Gabbard, who is a moderate Democrat or centrist Democrat, has come out and basically said Trump wins. So there's a fracture in the Democrat party leading over this as well. And so it's just a phenomenal place to be. So basically at the moment, what we're seeing is Trump's raising money left, right and centre. The more he gets indicted, the more he raises and the better his polling gets. DeSantis has entered the race officially. I think it's a bad move. I think he should have waited this one out. But anyway, he's entered the race. He basically launched his campaign on Twitter, and it was now it wasn't all his fault, but it went terribly wrong. That the quality of it was disastrous. A lot of it was actually Twitter's fault. They just didn't have the infrastructure set up correctly to hosting, and so it was just an absolute debacle and shit fight. So that's where we're at. We've got DeSantis in the race, which I don't think is a good thing. Trump's streaking ahead in the polls. DeSantis will find, because in the Republican Party, you've got those for Trump, those that are never for Trump, and then a group in the middle. And DeSantis is what he's going to try and do, and Nikki Haley, Ted Cruz, and a whole heap of the others are sitting in this middle space, is he's got to find a lane that he doesn't butt up against Trump, but he also has clean air to get. And I think the likes of Elon Musk, Peter Sachs, and who's the other one? Another big tech billionaire from Silicon Valley are all starting to lean towards DeSantis because they're all Florida. They're all moving business and stuff to Florida. So DeSantis has got to find his lane, got to find his path through this quagmire that is turning out to be the GOP never, non-Trump support, which is dwindling. So,
what about his population? I mean, his popularity with the general public, what is that kind of like in percentages?
So Trump's popularity?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Trump's popularity is 40 to 50% of those that are inclined to vote. He's about 30% of those who that may vote, and then those that would never vote for him, it's like 90% again. So it's real. Like if you don't like him, you don't like him. And in comparison, Biden's numbers are in the mid-30s, and that's it. So how people can think that Biden, well, we know how Biden's going to win because he'll have the media and he'll have everyone on his side. But the media, I don't think it's going to have the same cut through this time because people won't be basically stuck in their houses. All they're doing is watching TV. People will be out. Plus all the rule changes that are happening in some of the states. Plus people are now more aware on both sides of the political aisle of just how much the game was played. Now, a lot of people call what happened in the 2020 election fraud. It wasn't actually fraud. What they did is they played the game better in the postal vote system. They went so close to the line and probably in some instances stepped over the line. But they went so close to the line and took everything to the nth degree and built out a ballot stuffing machine where they collected as many votes as they possibly could. Now, were some of those votes double votes? More than likely. Were some of those votes from people that voted Republican as well as Democrat? More than likely. But what they actually didn't do was anything that was technically illegal, because remember, the rules in a lot of these states were changed to allow what they did. You had the likes of Facebook and I think it was MSNBC pumping $400 million into these programs. And the GOP was just caught off guard because they never thought that they would go there. This election, the GOP is going to be on it 100%. They'll be looking at it like nothing else. They'll be going through making sure that that it doesn't happen to the same degree as what it did happen before, and they'll start doing it themselves. And that's why the numbers were phenomenally huge. Like, we're talking turnout numbers in 2020 that's never, ever, ever been seen in percentage-wise and whatever in an American election ever. It's just absolutely phenomenal. So, yeah.
Yeah. While we're on this topic, we just got a question come through. Can you explain how the US elections are going to affect us here in Australia?
Not a lot. I don't think the US elections will affect us much here in Australia at all. From the point of view is that we're already seeing America at its worst, right? So if you designed a playbook to elect someone to destroy a country, we're watching it happen, right? So the Biden playbook is a massive destruction playbook on the US, and it's basically took everything that Trump had built on, and to some extent, I'll wash my mouth out after saying this, a couple of things that Obama got right, which is 1 out of 900. But the Democrats have even reversed Biden, Obama-era policies that were going the right way. They were going towards a centrist area. So, and Obama did a lot of bad for a lot of communities in the US, especially the African American, Latino communities that everyone said that's where his support come from. So what you can see now is that a lot of the world has already baked in that America can't get any worse, right? We know here in Australia that we really can't look at Australia. That's why when you have a look at the Defence Review, a lot of it's about making sure that Australia can stand on its own 2 feet without saying, hey, America, come to our aid. That's why we're Blue Water Navy. We're using, missiles and all this sort of stuff for long range, so we can basically park ourselves on our island and just shoot shit at people and say, go away. Because we won't have that big brother going forward anymore. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. So it's a good thing in the sense that Australia is going to finally start to put some emphasis into strengthening our military, opening up our eyes to that we've got a new empire on our doorstep, China, India. And if you have a look at a lot of the trade stuff, the defense stuff is still saying stay with America, stay with the old empire, build our stuff based on that. But if you have a look what's happening in the trade side of government, it's saying, let's do trade deals with China, let's do trade deals with Turkey. Let's do trade deals with India, especially India, because India is the next major raging elephant coming out of Asia. If it wasn't for the US sanctions on Russia, we would be doing trade deals with Russia as well, because we were before. We were starting to build bridges into Russia. We're building bridges into Indonesia. We're building bridges into Vietnam and so forth, Pakistan and that. So there's a two-pronged thing happening with Australia coming around, and Australia still hung its hat on the old empire to a probably in a 70-30 ratio, which is not going to be good for us going forward because the new empire is rising quicker. But we're still not in that complete transition phase. We've still got another 8-9 years to go for the full transition to 2030, 2032. The new empire still has some faltering to happen. Like China, Xi Jinping's got to go. Russia, Putin will go. The problem there is who comes after Putin is going to be worse. In China, at least, you'll get the capitalists back. India still got some sorting out of its own stuff to do, and we'll see where all that lands.
Now, another question here from Joanne and Tony. Also heard that Germany is in official recession and will ripple out through Europe. Could this affect Australia?
No, we don't. Not really. It will affect Australia from the point of view in the financial markets, because all the financial markets are linked these days. From the point of view of selling goods into Germany and into Europe, because a lot, especially foodstuffs and stuff, because of the Ukraine crisis, they need to buy more from alternate sources. So that's going to make up for any of the other economic loss that would have happened from them going into recession. Germany, France, Italy, Greece, Spain, most of Europe has basically been on the brink of recession for, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 years. And their economies are all over the place. That's why we talked last week about the immigration rush. The great immigration rush is what these countries are hanging their hat on, including Australia, about digging themselves out of tax holes that they're digging. So, yeah, Australia could do a lot more, but Australia needs to align itself more with where we sit in the world, i.e. Asia. Right? If we can align ourselves better with Asia without, my view is we should be the Switzerland. We should be a big neutral country where everyone wants to park their assets and we make shit here and ship it all over the world. But that's my fantasy. And I'll live that dream. But wherever we've got product other people want, it's a lot better than us having nothing that they need other than just the landmass.
Well, speaking of Asia, we'll move over to Asia, which is on Singapore. Singapore are now looking to ban cancel culture, which I think we can all agree is a big win for freedom of speech in the Singaporean economy. And I just wanted to get your opinion. Firstly, do you think it's the right decision? I think we all know the answer to that. And what are your thoughts on it? Do you think other countries should look to do the same thing?
Yeah, so this came about. A friend of mine in Singapore sent me the copy of the draft legislation. And we all know that Singapore is a massive authoritarian country, but it's also probably per head of capita, I think it is now the richest country in the world. per head of capita, and there's more money flowing into Singapore than Switzerland and all the big European, Liechtenstein and Luxembourg and that could wish for. It's an amazing turnaround from 1960 to today. So what's that, 60 years? It went from a swamp to the world's richest nation. That is just a phenomenal change around. And it needed a strong leader to do so. It needed someone hard-headed, a bit authoritarian, but it goes to show you that if you have that style of government, but put a big emphasis on prosperity, right, where we don't put a big a lot of the Western world doesn't have a prosperous bone in its body anymore. But if you have a look at places like Singapore, and Malaysia's trying to emulate that to some extent, Guyana in South America, Kenya, there's a couple other African countries who have all woken up and gone, oh fuck, if we become prosperous, we're going to, and a lot of them are citing Singapore's success, that if we put focus and emphasis on prosperity, we'll become very, very rich. That's what Singapore is bringing to the world, and the world is reacting to it and going for it. And part of that is allowing and curbing the bad influences of the rest of the world. And that's really what Singapore is doing. One of the ones I love, because I hate chewing gum, is I can't stand people that chewing gum. I just fucking hate it. Oh, mate, it's not the only people that I chew with their mouth open are fucking cows. Humans, it's just one of those things that bugs me. So if you want to get me rolled up at dinner, chew with your mouth open and act like a cow.
So does that mean next to coming up that I should come eating some gum for you?
Oh, I'll drive through the screen here and wire your mouth shut. I'm not a big fan of chewing gum, never have been. I just think it's a disgusting, lazy habit. But that's just me. Each to his own. So things like that in Singapore, where they curbed that, they took little things. And by the way, the ban on chewing gum in Singapore, there was a thing come out that I forget what it was. It was something stupid like $8 to $10 million a year they save on street cleaning compared to other cities, right? And some of the cities around the world have a massive problem with people that just spit shit out on the thing. And that just also shows you that that there's no respect. So people that just spit shit out on the street and throw it around and all this sort of stuff, there is a correlation between prosperity, respect for yourself, respect for your surroundings and other people. And that's one thing that Singapore has got right, is they actually create a lot of respect inside their own populace and all that sort of stuff. There is also a lot of people that have gone overseas to get educated, especially young 24-year-olds who have no fucking idea, that come back to Singapore and, they're against the Lee Kuan Yew and the government and all this sort of shit. And, we're going to be more free. And if you take that away, you just turn Singapore into the next failed state. And that's the problem with the youth that think of nothing apart from themselves and fucking waving flags and thinking that changes everything. But they'll learn. So anyway, back to this banning cancel culture. I think it's a great idea. I think it's for a place like Singapore, it's really, really good. It's going to weed out that woke bullshit influence that is creeping into places like Singapore, and what they've identified is, and this is one of those things where the libertarian in me says you don't need legislation to curb this because any adult with half a brain should know that this is fucking stupid. But we live in a world where adults don't have a fucking brain anymore. So putting this in place, I think, will be good. It'll weed out this influence of woke bullshit from and degradation of society, which is happening through this cancel culture and wokeism. Because what cancel culture is in its raw form is anti-free speech, is anti the ability to have an opinion, right? It's an emotional driven culture that basically means that you have no opinion of yourself. So if you've got no opinion and the only thing you've got is an emotion to work on, that's the lowest form of intelligence. So what Singapore is basically saying is we want a high intelligence population, right? So we want to get rid of this emotional ridden, low intelligence debate. So I think it's a good thing. Will it get up in Singapore? Probably, yeah. The parliament over there is pretty much all one way. So I think it'll probably get up. They probably have some tweaks and changes that I know their High Court's got some concerns. So they'll change. And I think it'll be good for their economy because it'll mean that you'll lose the emotional driven arguments that, as I said, lead to low intelligence. And that's what, mind you, is happening out here in the West and that we're dumbing down people. And the more you dumb down people, the easier it is to control them. And that's what it was. So Singapore, with it being high intelligence, non-emotional, high prosperity, and a fairly strict regime of culture and laws and all that sort of stuff, I think is very good for Singapore. Could it happen in Australia? Not in your life. Australia was born out of a convict-driven agrarian society that basically formed where everyone sort of was the same. So it's this egalitarianism that's ingrained in the Australian original ethos. And a lot of people that move here also have that. That's what they're seeking out, right? So Australia won't ever go the same way as a Singapore or even a Monaco. You know, people don't realise that Monaco is a pretty strict, high intelligence type place. Try and you step out of line in Monaco and they'll soon wrap you over the knuckles. So will it happen in other places? Yes, I think it'll happen in a lot of other places, especially places that are trying to emulate the Singapore prosperity model. They will start to ban the influence of the West and the falling empire on their prosperity, and that's what a lot of this wokeism is, and this cancel culture, wokeism, all that sort of stuff is all the same. It's anti-prosperity, right? It's anti being successful, and what we're seeing now is Singapore's proven that a country, fair enough, it's a city-state, but if you have prosperity at your heart, you can grow. So Kenya is trying to emulate that. Mauritius is another country that is trying to do the same thing in Africa. So it's an island off Africa, known as the gateway for investing in East Africa. And it is becoming a highly prosperous nation built around financial services and bridging international investment with East Africa. So it's becoming another one. Guyana, as I said, in South America. Most people don't even know where Guyana is. Guyana's next to Venezuela, next to Suriname, and then has Brazil underneath it. It's I think it's an ex-French colony that is trying to get its way in what do you say? But trying to make its way in the world. It's a country that is, I would say, if not the poorest, worst run country in the world, it's very much in the top 10 of those. It's up there with Haiti, North Korea, all those sort of despot, crappily run countries. But the leader of it has gone, fuck, I've got to do something. And the only way that I can see me becoming rich and the nation becoming rich is become prosperous. What's also happening in a lot of these despot nations around the world that used to rule by the gun is the generals and that used to rule by the gun are going, fuck, because we're stealing shit and not trading it properly, people aren't buying it, right? So we're getting put on sanctions list, and it's getting harder and harder in the international community to trade and do stuff. So what they're doing is their sons and daughters that have all been educated internationally, and a lot of them have been educated in places like Switzerland and Luxembourg and Canada, of all places. But they're all coming back going, prosperity is a very much better trait than poverty. So what we're going to see, and I don't know if it was on here or another podcast, probably 12 months ago, I was talking about Africa will be the next rising nation when the current leaders in a lot of these African nations die. And that's what we're starting to see now. Because the newer generations are realizing that prosperity is the way to go, not ruled by the gun. And meanwhile, they're not doing this because it's not going to make them rich. They're doing this because they realize that they can become 50 times richer than what they are now if they lead everyone into prosperity. Because then they won't have to have the big armies. They won't have to go around, trying to rule by a gun, which costs a lot of money. Right? They can actually do it because they look at countries like Australia that has a small army, doesn't have massive interference on a day-to-day from our military and police, as per those nations over there. So they're actually looking at it going, you know what, we need to change, and they are going to change over time. It's probably a long way of saying that, yes, this is good, prosperity is better, yes.
That's for sure. And we were just having confirmation from Aiden whether you meant Ghana or Guyana. Not sure if that's how to pronounce it.
No, Ghana's in Africa. Right, Ghana's a country in Africa, and that's another one that's kicking along. Now this is Guyana, Guyana, I think it is. It's in the top. If you're looking at South America, it's Venezuela. It's right next to Venezuela. Then it's Suriname, and across the top, they used to be. It was Portuguese, Spanish. I'm nearly sure French, Dutch. Sorry, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Portuguese. They're all the colonies are in there. And it's close to Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah. All right. Well,
trying to redraw the map in the air, but
showing us your geography skills.
What's that?
Showing us your geography skills.
Oh, I love geography. Geography is one of the things. I get this email, and it comes through, and it's a geography quiz thing. I've just subscribed to someone's website, and I think once a week they send you 25 geography quiz questions, and you click on it, and it's a thing, and yeah, and sometimes it's maps, and sometimes it's places. Like the one that was this week was know which country by the landmark. Yeah, so it's things like the Arc de Triomphe and the Big Buddha in Hong Kong and things like that.
So secretly, that's where you get all your world knowledge from, is from there.
100%, mate. Got to keep learning. If you're not learning, you're going backwards.
That's for sure. Well,
so I don't watch the Kardashians, mate. I do those sort of quizzes, or I watch. Did I watch the other night? It was really interesting. It was called the Race to Space. No, Back to Space. And it was an hour-long production on how we've gone from government space to private enterprise space. So,
well, Nadine just says there's another $2.99, and so
no, this one's free.
Oh, free! There you go. So if you feel like subscribing, go ahead. What we'll do now, we'll move to the final point of the global economy update, which is now moving across to Turkey. So the Turkey election has now finished, and Erdogan has won by a very narrow margin to lead for his third consecutive term. In your opinion, what does the election win mean for the future of Turkey and its new role in the new empire? Because we've been speaking about how Turkey is part of the new empire. So what does his election win mean for that?
Yeah, look, he's loving or hating, Erdogan is another authoritarian figure, very conservative in nature. He really appealed to the conservative community in Turkey. He only won by like 50.9 or 50.8%. So it's a very narrow victory. He won it in a runoff against he's the guy that he was running against was heavily backed by Europe and America, right? And because they don't want Erdogan, didn't want him getting another term, and because what Erdogan's doing is he's breaching where he sits at the top of the Middle East there. He is the bridge between the rest of the world and Russia, China, and to some extent India, but more so Russia and China, about getting goods and stuff through, because they control the Bosphorus Strait. Now, what a lot of the Western nations feared was if he got hold of it, he could then shut out Western nations from transversing the Bosphorus Strait, which he won't do because he is a fairly much an open trader. They are part of a lot of they're part of NATO, and they're part of one of the other trade organisations that's in there. So they straddle both worlds, and is a very much a supporter of Putin and a supporter of Xi and the Belt and Road and the new empire that's rising. So it's a third term. Not much will change in Turkey. Will he win a fourth term? I doubt it. They're going to have to find a more centrist person than the guy that he was up against that would have turned Turkey heavily towards the West, and lose its and basically create a shit fight. so this is a good thing for the BRICS and the emerging empire. We're starting to see that cement. And people in Turkey, some of them that it's very polarized in Turkey. So some of the guys that I know up there are very, very much in Erdogan's camp because he's making people money. But you've just got to, toe the line on his conservative views. And look, sometimes that's just what you've got to do. It's a transforming country. It's probably got another, I don't know, 10, 20 years to go in its total transformation, and it find its way in the new where it sits in the new pecking order. But it will find that a lot of engineering, manufacturing businesses are moving to places like Turkey and Georgia, just to the north of it, because of the way that their regimes work, and they're open to business and they want the investment there. So there's a lot of European manufacturing moving there. I think Airbus is even moving a part of its assembly plant or manufacturing plant to Turkey to build aircraft there. So this is it's a good thing. It creates stability in that part of the region.
What about, how does the World Economic Forum view him? Because we had a comment from Glenn saying they don't like him.
Hate him. Hate him because he's against all the shit. Because you got to remember he's conservative, and his party. I can't pronounce his party properly, but it's a conservative party, right? So it's a traditional conservative Muslim party. And the WEF and all that, you got to remember, they don't like anyone who has a faith. They don't like family, and he's for families, right? So anyone who supports those ideals, the Western world, the WEF world, are going to be out to destroy it. That's why they heavily ran against Bolsonaro in Brazil and put Lula in, right? Because once again, it's breaking down this traditional family value, prosperity-driven thinking, and that's what the WEF, they don't want that. They want, they don't want individuals. They want robots, and they don't want people who like family. So.
Well, we just had a comment from Glenn. Go Turkey.
Yeah, it's I like it. I haven't been to Turkey for quite a while, but I used to go there quite often. Quite like the country. It's got a great residency program if you want to live in that part of the world. Very good residency program, actually.
That's cool. Well, that wraps up all of the points we had for today. But if anyone has any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box. And I did see one earlier from Joanne and Tony while we were on the topic of just before the Singapore one, which is between the Europe and US going down, how could it affect our banks?
Yeah, so I've touched on this a couple of times before. So our banks rely on foreign capital to keep operating, and they're pretty much a protected species because there's only 4 of them pretty much here in Australia. Now, the government won't see our banks falter, and our banks are holding a lot of off-balance sheet items for governments and families in Europe, and to some extent the US as well. So we're talking about the elite of the elite, because Australia is seen as a place that won't get invaded. It's seen as a place that's so far away from the rest of the world that it's not going to be a problem. And it pretty much, our political system, even because we're immersed in that, we see the big changes, right? But the rest of the world don't see the big changes. Remember, the rest of the world look at us and go, they're fucking piss hands, right? So the Australian banking system is quite unique, even though it's exposed to the rest of the world, right? It's not going to be fully affected, as in we'll see a bank implode here in Australia. I don't think we'll see a bank imploding in Australia to the point that you will see them in Europe. Well, we are seeing it in Europe. Commerzbank in Europe, Credit Suisse in Europe, then First Republic and SVB in the US. So there was and because in those countries there was a lot more banks, there was a lot more financial institutions. You're going to have a lot more. We're sort of a protected species here. Now, does that mean they're going to dole out money, make it easier? And the biggest worry Australian banks have got is, one, basically them all being nationalised, right, and becoming one big national bank. Two is property. Australian banks are so exposed to property that they pretty much have minimal capital reserves. I think most Australian banks are in the 3% to 4% capital reserves. So if there is a big move in property markets and the bond markets, there could be a squeeze there. But is that going to mean that the bank's going to implode and they're going to go away? No. It just means we may end up, instead of having 4 banks, we'll have 2. And both of those banks will be 50% owned by the government. And the government will just go into more debt and protect them that way. The more I look at it, the more I see what's going forward is Australia's positioning. If you have a look at a very high level, Australia is, as much as we are going the wrong way societally, from a wealth protection aspect and New Zealand's gone this way heavily as well, aimed around our banking system and our ability to hold money here as a foreigner, off balance sheet, off the bank's balance sheet, so holding it in gold or art or cars or that sort of stuff through private wealth banks is regarded as a fairly sound place to be compared to the equivalent type services offered in Europe or the US, for instance.
Yeah, that's a good response.
And I'll just add one more thing is I mentioned we're not going to get invaded. A lot of old European families fear a war on their soil and having the armies march through and take their stuff. So during World War II especially, and what happened in World War I as well, but in World War II, America and Russia probably more so than the Americans, raped and pillaged as they went through. When they took over, it's a lot of it's been erased out of the history books. But as Hitler gathered everything up, as the Americans and the Russians took control of a lot of the stuff in Europe, they just raped and pillaged a lot of the gold and other precious metals and artworks and all that sort of stuff, and it made its way back, right? And that's what was to repay America for supporting the fight in Europe. So there was a lot of that sort of stuff, and a lot of it's been written out of history, and that the Nazis were bad. Yeah, the Nazis were fucking terrible, but they just collected it and made it easier for the Americans and to some extent the Brits, but the Americans and Russians going through an old guy that Dad was a business partner with. He was Greek, and his family were Greek in the Greek resistance. And he was telling us that after the war, the amount of valuables that the Americans and more so, and as much so, if not more so, the Russians stole because the Nazis put it in big caches. They just went and took it. Oh, this is easy. Thank you. And away they went. So War is a terrible thing. So that's why a lot of the European families, and to some degree, some of the North American families, eye New Zealand and Australia off as very safe places to put physical stuff, because we're in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. We had another question here from Jana as well. In your opinion, will we definitely move to CBDCs?
I don't reckon we will. I think that they're going to trial it. They're going to use it. If you have a look, there's a growing use of cash in places like China. The credit score is not going as well as what they thought it was, especially in the part of the country that is poor, right? The reason that China still remains a developing nation is because something like 60% of the nation is still under the poverty line, so it can hold that developing nation status. And the passport in that is in, I think it's the 24 or 25 major cities in China, but the rest of the country is rallying against it, and that doesn't get into the media a lot. There is a fight going on between the banks that will be involved in the CBDCs and the banks that won't be, and they're having that big push to and fro with government. Because you've got to remember, is the banking system controls, especially in America and Europe, the banking system controls the economy. The reason governments want to control the money is so that they can control the economy, right? Australia, to a lesser degree, has that, even though our central bank and that is funded by the big banks, it's still controlled to a degree controlled by the government. So the government has more control over our economy here than, say, in Europe, and that, where a lot of the original Rothschild style banking had big influence. So the Rothschild view on central banks and the JP Morgans and the Carnegies and the Mellons and all that in North America took on the same vein. That's how the Federal Reserve come to be, is that this group of private people control the money, which controls the economy. The government controls society, right? So, and that was the sort of the underlying written rule in Europe and America during those days, that we will fund you. You're going to remember, private families funded the build of Europe and funded the build of America, right? Not the government. It's only the government funding everything is only a new thing. It's only sort of been around the last 70 years. It hasn't been around, probably longer than that now, 80 or 90 years. But since 1913, 1915 onwards. But before that, the economies and everything was pretty much funded by the big families that controlled all the money and controlled the economies. And that sort of stuff, and did most of the development, built the hospitals, built the roads, built the schools, built towns. If you have a look at a lot of the most famous company town in all the world is Hershey in America. An entire town built to house the workers of the housing for the Hershey factory. Volkswagen, Porsche, all these big companies did the same thing in Europe. They took over towns and they owned towns and they built towns. The shipping companies did the same thing. So there is a lot of difference between how the US and Europe and our banking system works. So look, you can have your deposits taken, yes. You can have stuff nationalised. I'd be more worried about, in Australia, the confiscation of your assets due to a frivolous concern that you're doing something wrong, rather than a bank failure.
Are we seeing any signs like of that coming in?
Oh, all these anti-hoon laws, the asset forfeiture laws, you know, around organised crime. All they've got to do is suspect you of being organised crime, and they can just hold all your assets. They can just freeze everything. That's happening right now. Hundreds of people every month are having their assets forfeited, right, because they could be, right, and then they've got to go and prove their innocence.
Yeah,
not the other way around.
Yeah, you actually know someone actually who was in that position where his bank account recently got frozen for that reason. So it actually is happening in real life.
Oh, it's happening all the time. You know, we've got funds that have been transferred around the world that have been frozen because some of it's been frozen for months and months, because they want more information, but you can never get to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
This gets flagged as a suspicious transaction.
Yeah. And yeah, even we just had a comment there. I know someone who lost everything to the government house, car, and bank account for iron drug. There was a question here from Joanne and Tony as well. How do you see the trucking and logistics unfolding in Australia given the zero net expectations?
There's going to have to be concessions made in Australia for this, or otherwise nothing will happen. Our trucking industry is getting smacked left, right, and centre at the moment. Fuel costs going up, registrations going up, the bullshit legislation around driving hours and all the extra hurdles that have been put in place. The extra 6% they're going to have to pay for road user taxing. It's a real terrible state that our truckies are facing. So they're in an uphill battle. The net zero, my prediction, and we're actually starting to see it, is governments, especially governments in Europe, they're all preaching we've got to get to net zero, got to do 2030. But then when you have a look at their actual actions, what they are actually doing, right, they're not meeting their targets. They'll never meet their targets, and they know they never will. The only reason where that Australia is putting these targets in place and trying to meet them is because our political leaders, and it doesn't matter whether it's Liberal or Labor, are trying to be, look at me, look how fucking good I am on the world stage. And that is the problem that that Australia has, is because we're just fucking not regarded as a nation of power, a nation of anything, that our political leaders, to try and keep in the club, you know, are destroying the country through these stupid things, and destroying our industries. The head of Illumina, the chairman of Illumina, come out, I think it was today or yesterday, and said this net zero thing is going to have to be wound back. If you want to keep companies like mine, which is the alumina smelter, aluminium smelters in this country, you're going to have to keep coal-powered fire stations. It's just how it is, because wind and solar, the largest battery, so he said the largest battery in Australia will power half his aluminium smelter. I can't remember which one it was. I think it's the one in Adelaide. Will power half that smelter for an hour. He said if they try to power the whole thing, it'd last 25 minutes. They pretty much wouldn't even get a turn of the blast furnace. So batteries and storage and renewables don't work. We've got to go to more sustainable, reliable energy. And that's, as far as I'm concerned now, that's pretty much coal, gas, nuclear. If if all these greenies and fucking zero people that believe in climate change and that, if they actually were doing it because they wanted to save the environment and not just fucking virtual signal and go, look at me, look how good I am, they'd be supporters of nuclear power. They'd be the champions and leaders of nuclear power because it's the only dense form of energy on this planet, right, that can produce electricity as fast and as much as required in a zero emissions form. There is no argument against it. There is none. No argument against it. The nuclear rods that go into power stations, the enrichment that's done can't be used for weapons grade. Right? It can be used for a dirty bomb because anything can be used for a dirty bomb. Fuck. I could go and get a heap of medical waste from the local hospital and create a dirty bomb. People don't realise how much nuclear waste is sitting at our hospitals. Fucking heaps of it. Right? And so that's where dirty bombs, like all these dirty bombs you hear of, which is basically nuclear material triggered by conventional explosives. Most of that comes from places like hospitals. Doesn't come out of nuclear reactors from, bloody power stations. It's just fucking stupid. And that's how stupid these people are. And yeah, so look, we've got to use rail more in this country, but we're seeing inland rail blowing out and becoming an absolute fucking joke. We're seeing truckies get hammered by all sorts of things that make it harder and harder. So they've got to put their prices up. We're not spending any money on our roads. North Queensland roads are fucking shit. Western New South Wales roads aren't much better. Victorian roads, you get off. The good thing that Victoria and New South Wales did is basically from the border with Queensland to Victoria to Melbourne, is they built dual lane carriageway. That's a phenomenal idea. Queensland, you get north of Gympie, and the dual lane carriageway stops. You can go on the goat tracks, right, as a national highway. It's just stupid, absolutely stupid. So the thing that makes this country run and tick is not getting supported. So.
Yeah, we had a comment here. Apparently they've banned gas installation in new homes in Canberra.
They're banning gas here in Queensland. You won't be able to put, the developers won't be able to put gas lines in. They're doing it in New South Wales and Victoria and new developments as well. It's stupid. And this is where we said that the other week that if you want to change Australia, run for council. Get on council. Because we're going to stop the lefties at the council level. Right? State governments and federal governments don't affect our lives as much as councils do. People really have to realise how much of the bullshit that is being inflicted on us is actually being inflicted by councils. Our housing crisis is really a council problem. Our roads, rates, and rubbish, in our city is a council problem. So.
And when you hear all this stuff going on, it makes sense why a lot of people are fleeing Australia for countries like Thailand, Bali, and all of these different places.
Yeah, cost of living's a lot lower. Fiji, Vanuatu, go and live out there. One of the guys that I'm meeting later tonight, actually, him and his wife moved to Vanuatu in the last 6 months. They've had a house over there for quite some time, but they've moved full time there. Right, they're back here now, packing everything up. They'll never come back to Australia. Well, not for permanent residence. They'll come back to Australia to see their kids and grandkids and stuff. But they have no inclination to move back to Australia.
But a question here as well: aren't local councils under the power of the states?
Yeah, they are, but the states just let them run rampant. Because you've got to remember is that the states go, oh, the councils did that, we didn't do it. Right? There's no responsibility taken at the state level. And the other problem is what most people don't realise is especially out there in wokeland, is the most powerful government that Australia has is the state government. But over the last 30, 40 years, and John Howard, he was part of the problem with this, is the state governments have let the federal government take over a lot of the responsibility. So the state government can go, hey, it's a feds problem, right? And state governments will let councils get outside of roads, rates and rubbish and gone, oh, no, look, that's a council problem, right? So all tiers of government work against each other. If we had a strong series of state governments that actually run to the federal constitution and run to the Australian, to their own state constitutions, our federal government would be 3 people, 2 donkeys and a fucking cat. Because that's our federal government. If you have a look at our constitution, the federal constitution, there is no Department of Education, Department of Labor, Department of Transportation. Oh, there is transportation, but that's for railways. For some reason, railways are national. There's pretty much none medical, hospital, anything that is inward looking is all state responsibility. Everything outward looking is the Fed's responsibility, and taxation. So there is no need for the massive bureaucracies that Canberra has. None. They should all be at the state level, and the country would be run a lot better if it actually run along its true federation lines.
Mm. Yeah, and we had a question here too from Frank. Do roads come under state and federal law? I mean, federal. So,
see, this is the confusing part. So, roads actually are state responsibilities, except for the part of the road that straddles a border and is part of intercommerce between the states. So that I think it's that then becomes the part of the trans, and a road that is associated with a railway. It comes under the feds. But what's happened is, again, because the feds control the money, right, we have the federal highway system that is the responsibility of the federal government. But roads are actually a responsibility of the states.
Yeah, well, that seems to be all the questions. So as usual, we always like to finish off with a fun fact, and I noticed that you've got one here for us.
Yeah. So here it is, people. Get ready. You're going to have to type an answer. How much do you have to earn to be in the 1% of earners globally? I'm going to give you 3 answers. 32,000, 73,000, or 155,000. So, and this is US dollars, mind you. So how much do you have to earn to be in the 1% of earners globally? So basically, to be in the 1%. Is it 32,000, 73,000, or 155,000? Ding 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 ding.
We'll see who's right.
Ding 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 ding. You'll be surprised at the number. And there's probably some people on here have heard me say it before. So it's $32,000. That's it. $32,000 puts you in the 1% of earners globally. So pretty much most people in Australia are in the 1% of global earners. Now, that comes down to the fact, it's just a mathematical equation. For round numbers, we'll say there's 8 billion people on the planet. Out of those 8 billion, only 1.5 billion are above the poverty line. That's a lot of poor people. That's a lot of poor people out there. that is growing. It's getting, it is fastly moving towards 2%. But, you know, 2 billion out of 8 billion is only 20% of the population. Out of those, and so let's work on 2 billion. Out of those 2 billion, right, 1 billion are earning between the poverty line and 32,000. And then after that, you're pretty much down to 1% of the world's population, right, earn 32,000 US or more. And so when you look, when you actually start looking at the world from those eyes, anyone earning $32,000 or more a year US, so what's that, 32, about 52,000 Australian, 50,000 Australian, you're in the lucky sperm club. Because you could have quite easily been born somewhere else and be shit out of luck. So all these fucking idiots running around saying that the 1%, the 1%, the 1%, most of them are the fucking 1%. You know, and they need to get their heads fucking screwed on, and they need to actually start really having a look that, you know, the reason that they're able to do what they can do, you know, in their wokeism and all their fucking sipping lattes and eating tofu and bullshit, living their loft apartments, is purely and simply because people that come before us did so much to make sure that we were in the global 1%.
And yeah, it is true. I mean, I haven't done it myself, but I know people who do it, and a lot of them say is that all you have to do to realize how lucky you are is just take a trip over to a place like a small village in Kenya or Cambodia or somewhere like that, and you'll realize how fortunate you are down here, and probably will make you appreciate a lot more the income that you have.
Yeah, just go to an Aboriginal settlement here in Australia. Go out west to an Aboriginal settlement. You'll see how lucky you are. And most people, especially the under 34, you know, that 18 to 34-year-old bracket, who have never, ever seen heartbreak, or never ever seen anything, you know, of a major catastrophe, or, you know, anything but prosperity. You know, they just don't know how good they got it. So there you go, people. I am gonna have to run because I've got to get to my my next
meeting, I guess you can say.
Yeah, well, it's a catch up with some people, but you know, here we go.
Yeah, that's all good. Thanks for that fact. I think it surprised everyone here, myself included. But yeah, thanks again, Stephen, for your time and sharing all of this knowledge. It's always beneficial to everyone, and I've always enjoyed it. So thanks as well to everyone who attended, stayed till the end. Great to have your engagement and see you guys enjoyed and having your questions come through. And as usual, we look forward to seeing you guys next week at the same time. And before we wrap up, any final words from you, Stephen?
No, just go out there and be grateful, and you know, realize that yeah, we are part of the Lucky Sperm Club. Living here, we are part of the Lucky Sperm Club. So
for sure. Well, enjoy the rest of your night, everyone, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
To kick the habit that my